when I said I'd taken on this particular role, I got responses like, "That's interesting," and I also got, "You did what?" And so I thought it was time to pick up and answer that invitation to tell you what was happening up there at Karori. I think it's appropriate given Mark's introduction, pioneering and influential. That's this club. And I also believe that that's Karori Sanctuary's place, the first mainland sanctuary. So pioneering in that sense and doing a lot of things that were new, first time, weren't entirely sure they were all going to work, and they have. I know that many of you, not only Helen, have long associations with the sanctuary, so I'd like just to test that out. Now I know there's at least one person who stands up on this call, someone who's been a trustee or involved with the foundation of the sanctuary. Stand up, Russ. Thank you, Russ. Someone, and stay standing because we'll just see how many we have in the room. Someone who's volunteered, and those of you who have, Leslie, stand up. Who else has volunteered? Thank you. Right. Members, people you may or may not have a membership now, but anyone in the room who's ever had a membership? Very good. Okay. Anyone who's been a donor or supporter, perhaps via one of those fence posts? Maybe a few more. Anyone who's ever visited the sanctuary? Is a neighbour of the sanctuary? Has seen a kaka flying over the sanctuary?
Perching in the trees.
Yeah? Who knows anyone who has ever visited? Okay, you can sit down now. I think that I was coming to that. Thank you, Kerry. And so the connections go deep, don't they? And as Kerry just mentioned, most significantly, I think, the ratepayers of Wellington City, because the sanctuary, of course, benefits from a very generous support, which is helping us address a number of issues that we face at the moment. And it's appropriate too that it's this week and this month, because 20 years ago this month, an establishment group actually launched the feasibility study for the establishment of a fenced sanctuary in what had been the old water reserve, and it of course became the first mainland fenced sanctuary, now a major resource for Wellington. And we're going to be celebrating a number of 20-year anniversaries, if you like, over the next little while. And of course all of this is made possible by community support, including this Rotary Club, including many other Rotary clubs in Wellington, members, volunteers, supporters, trustees and many others. So what I want to do today, and briefly, is give you an update on some of the successes, some of the challenges that we face, and some of the future strategies. So hopefully that's an answer to the questions that a number of you have asked me. What we have now is a very significant physical foundation. It's 225 hectares. It's protected by an 8.6 kilometre long predator-proof fence. And it's a now developed eco-sanctuary with a very unique position. There are other eco-sanctuaries who really work as a collaborative grouping of sanctuaries, learning a lot from each other. But this is the only one which is really established right at the heart of a city. Has neighbours all round it, as Helen mentioned, hearing the Kiwi call at night. That, I think, is significant and offers opportunities. But that physical resource matters because it's a foundation for other things, for restoration success. I think that the kaka are kind of the poster birds, really, because we see them now all over Wellington. There's one in that photo being banded, but when you see the graph there, it's showing the numbers of kaka as they extend from back in 2004, just over 20 of them, now more than 200, I think, at last count, and almost too many to count. We've stopped banding them now and stopped the close monitoring. And what's really interesting is that they are spreading out around Wellington. And in that lower left photo, there's Matu Booth, who's one of the conservation officers at Zealandia, and he's having a look at the first kaka chick, which has fledged outside the sanctuary boundary in well over 100 years. okay, 100 years, or more, a little bit more than 100 years since kaka became previously extinct in the wild in Wellington. And that little chick did survive, as we understand it, over in Prince of Wales Park in Berrenport. But it's also a signal that not only the birds are going outside the boundary, but also our activities. And so we're increasingly involved in what's called the Halo project, which is a recognition that the sanctuary isn't just about what's within the fence. It's about inspiring conservation and restoration action in every household and in every backyard around Wellington. And we're starting with the backyards in Kelburn, because that's quite nice. That happens to be where mine is, but in fact the partnership is with Kelburn School, and a project which gets the kids at the school going home and getting their families enthused about taking action in their backyards. It may be about initially counting possible predators in their backyards. I was tempted to have a photo here of a cat, but I didn't. But yes, it does include cats. To have a look at what birds are visiting your backyard, and then over time introduce action based on that knowledge. So we see not only conservation action there, but citizen science. And this is a facility that has huge capacity to add to that live connection, which is of great interest, I think, to this club. Some of you will know about the programs, Young People in Schools, over 8,000 students last year, informal programs. And then a lot more coming informally. Those are my Brooklyn Scouts down there. It's a somewhat staged photograph. They never stay still terribly long, but they were for that particular photo. And a little guy meeting a tuatara, he looks sort of thrilled, I think. What's that? But a really unique opportunity. And I know that for my Scouts, and they're not easily impressed, coming back after walking out in the night, it was kind of scary. It's pretty dark out there in the valley at night, and hearing and seeing kiwi, a really standout experience for them, which I know got some of them enthusiastic about doing some other stuff too. So they're now furiously planting plants down on the Ohio stream, which is good. So we not only have the kids visiting, but also the young at heart. We are a significant destination for tourists and for visitors to Wellington. In this last summer, many of them from the cruise ships. And in total visitors this year that's just ended are around 85,000. But the majority of our visitors are Wellingtonians. And I think that's why Wellington has to be at the heart of what we do. We are a community-based conservation project, so we get our strengths as much from the people, and I'd say perhaps even more importantly from the people, than the physical assets. There is a men's shed of sorts up at the sanctuary. Those are the workshop Wednesdays, is that right, Natasha? Pictured there. And then a lot of people who are out there doing planting and weeding and all of those other maintenance. This is a facility that could not work without volunteers. Absolutely essential to what we do. But the challenges go beyond nature. That's the fence 2 weeks ago after the big storm. And there was a team of volunteers out on site within, we think, a few hours of that happening, picked up by one of our volunteer monitoring people, and then a crew that stayed there with big arc lights going through right into the night until that was fixed. But of course, repairing the fence is part of it. We also have some other repairs to do, and that's towards creating a sustainable business model. I want to acknowledge the work that is being done not just by the current board, but by past boards. This is a hard ask, making a facility like this really work in the business sense. And Russ, I know that you and your team sweated blood over that too. Some of the challenges that we face, there are revenue and expenditure challenges in terms of a balanced budget. We need to find ways to earn more sustainable revenue, and we have an urgent need to improve staff accommodation, something that they moved into temporary bungalows 18 years ago, Natasha, and they are still there, so we're doing something about that. Relationships matter enormously to us, so visitor experience, we think there's room for improvement there. And we think we could do more to build strong partnerships with other Wellington organisations. Reputation is something we have to face. We're widely seen as expensive, and we're not yet seen in the way we want to be as value for Wellington. So here's the opportunity which is there. As I mentioned, we have very significant support from Wellington City, have had since the foundation of the sanctuary, had in the form of a $10.5 million loan to support the building of the visitor centre, and now have funding through to the middle of 2015, ready to give us a foundation for turnaround. So the city providing about a quarter at the moment of our target revenue. We have a new board appointed, we have newly formed guardians, a new strategy and business plan, and we're getting on with it. So our opportunity now is to create that recovery, leading to a truly sustainable business and an asset that adds high value for Wellington. These are our vision and mission. You'll be relieved to hear I'm not going to run you right through the business plan. We think there's a terrific, and some of you will have heard this, the 500-year vision of the valley. But we have to have something here which is also accessible in the medium term. So we're really setting out to be widely recognised as that essential part of Wellington's identity and natural heritage. And we have a restoration mission which is not only about restoring nature, but it's also the connection between people and nature. And it's for the people of Wellington and beyond. And it's all within the context of that very long-term view of what you can do when you have a very special place with a lot of effort going into it. So how we get there? We have to face the challenge and own it, and we have to fix it in those areas of relationships and reputation and revenue. So lots of good ideas, lots of fresh thinking that's been built on what's been done before. What you can expect to see, that our focus is very visibly on Wellington. We'll be coming up with a relaunched price and membership packages at rates with which Wellingtonians really believe is good value. We have a new partnership with Victoria University, which involves staff and students actually being located at Zealandia and making research activities a living part of our day-to-day activities. We're looking for ways to improve our engagement with visitors and members and supporters, and especially about making information and ideas available about what you can do when you go away. And last and certainly not least, managing our finances in a sustainable way. Partnerships are going to be vital to us, so here's some of the organisations. Wellington City head of the list because they are our principal funder. Victoria University of Wellington, who I think we will see have a growing presence on the Zealandia site. The Tenth Trusts, certainly the other council-controlled organisations who've already been very generous in their support for us, helping us out with some review activities over the last 6 months. And then other community groups such as Rotary. So there's partnership. So I want to finish with a picture. I actually said to a friend, look, we're organising a dinner later in August with the big boy from down south, and she said, ooh, Richie McCaw. And I had to say, no, I'm sorry, not Richie McCaw, but Sirocco. Okay. So Sirocco is back from a little later this month through August. So what I hope is that each of you can think about the ways that you can be a partner in an endeavour which I think is enormously important has huge potential for Wellington, part of what makes us special as a natural capital. This really is an unusual place in the way that you can be in the heart of the city and experience nature at almost the same time. So enjoy the wings over Wellington. A number of you will have kaka flying close by. Do visit and encourage others to visit, and do consider supporting what is a very unique Wellington asset. And I can mention one thing that we will do. It's not the dinner with Richie McCaw, sadly, but it's the dinner with Sirocco. We'll be organising a Rotary event later in August, which will be a visit and then a dinner. I think we've got a maximum of 28 people. I think I've got about 7 or 8 takers so far, so there'll be information coming around on the tables with that later. So thank you for your interest, thank you for your support. You can see around the room there's a great deal of that already, and a lot of good things to look forward to up the hill. Thank you. Well, I think it's a really good parallel in the sense of the zoo when the board was appointed back in 2003 had a near-death experience. Yeah, I think Kerry's sitting there, would probably agree with that. The council had made the call to keep the zoo going, but frankly it was in pretty poor shape in lots of ways. Dedicated people who tried to keep things going as best they could, and a lot of people who thought that zoos were a rather old-fashioned thing. And so what we had to concentrate on, actually, if we had a 4R strategy, relationships and reputation and revenue, they were much the same sort of things that we're facing now. I think the advantage that we have is a terrific built facility, great conservation results, and a new building which has some real potential, I think, to make better use of it for Wellington. But yes, a lot of experience, Richard, which I think we can draw parallels from. I think there is a question about recognising that these sorts of facilities exist because the community loves them. Yeah? And not everybody perhaps, but a broad sense of community ownership. And that, I think, we haven't quite managed to do that so far with the sanctuary. That's what we'll be working on. Profile tree. One is to acknowledge that what you now see in terms of pest reduction is exactly the result of collaboration. It's a combination of City Council, of the Regional Council, and a whole lot of volunteers getting out there and doing their bit, and that's had enormous benefits. So that's certainly part of what we now see as the spreading benefit with Kāka and so on, is that they're going into areas where predation's been reduced. There are issues, isn't it? It's the kind of benefit is that we have Kāka flying wide, and of course that exposes them and possibly us to risk from time to time. So Stuart, I think that's that reflection of birdsong over Wellington, coming from combined efforts. I mean, terrific stuff being done in Wilton's Bush, Otari, right through the town belt, and so the Kiraroo we see are benefiting from that much wider area as well, which is why I don't think we can look at any of these enterprises or areas as single units. They're joined up, and that's what makes Wellington special. A number of things, Trish, is to make sure that those things that we are doing do in fact make us money. So we're having a hard look at some of the things that we are spending money on and investing in. We know that we do well with our overseas visitors, so that's one of our build-up earning streams. We know that we need to have Wellingtonians on our side. So when I spoke about price adjustments, we have no expectation that it's going to make us money in the short term, which is quite a difficult thing to face. But we believe the relationship with Wellingtonians counts most of all. We have to look at ways of getting really scale, I guess, into our operations, which is where we see a terrific opportunity with Victoria University coming on board as a partner, having space in the building, contributing research activities actively, and taking up a very strong interest in what's happening in the valley. We have a number of ideas on the, I guess, brewing, but not ready to launch yet. We think there are opportunities to use some of the add-on packages, and we already have night tours. We have Sirocco visits. We think that there's more that we could do in that area. But we're pretty realistic about this not being an easy or overnight answer. There have been very smart people on boards and management before now, and they too know that it requires creativity and hard work.